Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marcus Coleman. I serve as the director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Homeland Security. I want to thank everybody for joining this webinar today. A few things to note. This webinar does have closed captioning and ASL interpretation available. In addition, portions of this webinar are recorded and will be distributed for those that are unable to attend today. Want to encourage you to stay connected with us with your questions via the Q&A chat pod, and we will continue to provide updates in the future via our various listservs. And so I want to thank you for joining us again, and we will start the webinar in just a moment. We're going to give a few more seconds for people to join. All right, again, thank you all very much for joining today's webinar as part of our effort to promote protecting places of worship. This is a webinar that's going to provide a briefing and information about resources for faith-based and community-based organizations. Once again, my name is Marcus Coleman. I serve as the director for the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Homeland Security, one of several centers of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Today's agenda, we will have opening remarks from two of our assistant secretaries at the Department of Homeland Security, and special remarks from Executive Director Melissa Rogers from the White House Office. As mentioned, this webinar will include a threat briefing ahead of the fall religious observances. We'll provide a preview for the 2023 Protecting Places of Worship Weeks of Action that will occur during National Preparedness Month. And then you will hear from various colleagues across the interagency about resources that are available for places of worship, community spaces, and other organizations. We have opportunities for Q&A throughout the chat. If you can just type in the Q&A pod, and we'll be sure to provide additional information as appropriate. And so, Nicole, I want to do a quick audio check. Can you hear me okay?
We can, sir, and thank you so much.
Excellent. We also recognize that in addition to protecting places of worship and community spaces from our man-made hazards and threats, that there continues to be preparations needed for upcoming natural hazards. We continue to encourage everyone that is within the path of impacts from Hurricane Idalia to take time to prepare now. If you visit ready.gov, you will receive information on how to prepare for disasters. And now is the time to prepare again. In Florida, in Georgia, South Carolina, we want to encourage everyone to do a few things. Number one, continue to stay in tune and listen to the guidance of your local officials, and make sure that, again, you and your families are taking the necessary steps to prepare now. With that, we'd like to start with welcoming remarks from two of our assistant secretaries at the Department of Homeland Security. First, we will call up Assistant Secretary Brenda Abdullah for the Office of Partnership and Engagement, and also the DHS Faith-Based Security Coordinating Officer. Brenda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. As Marcus mentioned, my name is Brenda Abdullah, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar today on protecting places of worship in advance of the various fall religious observances. I'd like to thank Director Marcus Coleman and my colleagues with the DHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships for facilitating this critically important discussion today between our DHS offices and other critical interagency partners across U.S. government. I'd like to start by offering a note of condolence for all the victims of the racially motivated shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, the impact of which goes far beyond the victims and their families. As Secretary Mayorkas had said, the department is closely monitoring the situation and will continue to provide support to law enforcement and the Jacksonville community to keep everyone safe. please do let us know how we can continue to be supportive of you and your communities. Faith-based leaders and institutions are often the first ones to support communities following such tragedies. They continue to provide the critical long-term support for grieving communities. We commend all of you for your tireless efforts and value our partnership with you to meet the needs of our fellow Americans. Along those lines, keeping you, your places of worship, and institutions safe is a priority for the department. And this webinar today focuses on the various efforts to protect those places of worship so congregations and individuals can feel safe and secure as they worship freely across the nation. As noted in the introduction, I also have the pleasure of serving as the department's faith-based organization security coordinator. We meet with faith leaders and communities nationwide to hear directly from you, your perspectives, your needs, and your feedback on our work. We convene our partners across the department and beyond to better inform our policies and activities as we collectively work to meet the needs of our faith-based stakeholders. Our goal is to ensure an effective two-way communication between the department and the communities we serve. And I'm pleased to share that in the past year, we've implemented a number of new initiatives to ensure that two-way communication is in place. We've had a series of engagements across the country, oftentimes with the DHS Secretary himself, as well as our Deputy Secretary and other senior officials across the department. We've hosted listening sessions, threat briefings, information on DHS grants, discussions about our national security policies, and respond to the concerns of treatment of religious communities across all of our programs. In October of 2022, the Secretary Mayorkas announced and convened a multi-denominational faith-based security advisory council. It's comprised of 25 faith leaders and other experts across the country. The council met in person in June and discussed a series of findings and recommendations as a result of various taskings the Secretary set them off to do. The subcommittees have provided critical information to the department on how to improve information sharing with faith communities, how to make our grants and resources more accessible, and how to deepen and build trust and partnerships with faith-based stakeholders. And we're in the process of implementing those critically important recommendations. Since the beginning of the year, we've visited multiple cities across the country, and we've been accompanied by various members across the department's leadership, including our Assistant Secretary that you'll hear from in a moment, Sam Vinograd. Our engagements have taken place with faith communities from Michigan to Minnesota, Southern California, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and we continue the work as we continue for the rest of the year to visit communities. We welcome and look forward to visiting you and hearing directly from you. And we'll be sure to provide our contact information if you're interested in our team visiting your local community. But for today, you'll hear from my colleagues on our critical lines of effort to meet the needs of your community stakeholders, and so importantly, that is a top priority for the department. I hope you find today's webinar informative and relevant to the day-to-day needs of your place of worship, institution, and community. Thank you again for having me, Director Coleman. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Abdullah. I would now like to introduce Assistant Secretary Samantha Vinograd, who has a very large and important portfolio, specifically thinking about how we prevent some of these targeted acts of violence that occur. So it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Assistant Secretary Sam Vinograd to provide additional remarks from DHS and talk a bit about how we are really focused on prevention as well.
Director Coleman, thank you so much. And for everyone that's joining today, it's a pleasure to be with you to talk about issues affecting all of our communities and our families around the country. My name is Samantha Vinograd, and I have been working to address religiously motivated violence for a long time. On a personal level, I am the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, and from a very early age, have been very aware of what hate-fueled violence feels like, looks like, and how it's incumbent upon each of us to address it in any way that we can. And that is just one reason why I feel so honored to be the Assistant Secretary here at DHS, where I can use and draw upon resources here at the department, our partnerships, and more to ensure that places of worship are as safe and secure as possible. As Assistant Secretary Abdul mentioned, we here at the department have been engaged in a series of outreach efforts related to the administration's national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. Many parts of this department were involved in the drafting of that strategy, and we are working to implement specific requirements assigned to the department as a part of that strategy, to include convening listening sessions around the country. Our visit to Nashville was incredibly instructive in hearing about issues affecting members of the Jewish community there. And thinking about how we can incorporate information, for example, about bias and discrimination into everything that we do more broadly. And our work to address anti-Semitism is unfolding alongside efforts to address other forms of religiously motivated violence at the same time. Now, Director Coleman mentioned the work that we do to prevent acts of targeted violence and terrorism well before they occur. We're joined today by Director William Braniff. Director Braniff runs our Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, or CP3 as we call it here at the department. CP3's mission is to work to prevent, using what we call public health informed approach, work to prevent acts of violence before they occur, really using methodologies developed to prevent other kinds of violence, like domestic violence, substance abuse, and more. And we can talk more about that later in this session. In general, here at DHS, we are looking to provide resources to provide for physical security, such that if an attack is about to occur, and my colleagues will go into this in greater detail, such that if an attack is about to occur, places of worship are as physically secure as possible. In addition to that, again, we are working to prevent acts of violence well before they occur via CP3, and really to address a whole really potential lifespan of an act of violence. And the only way that that is possible is through partnerships and through the exchange of information. And that's why for everybody on this call today, I see the numbers going up as we're speaking. We're close to 1,800 participants right now. What I would say is each of us has a role to play in our communities. We have CP3 field staff around the country. We have folks that can be your counterpart in your communities to work on prevention. We have other DHS personnel across the country as well who work on physical security. And I would encourage everybody on this call afterwards to find out who their local point of contact is, so that if and when you have additional questions or concerns or need assistance, you have a point of contact. And I'm sure that Director Coleman and others will be glad to provide that information in the future. So I will just say thank you. My office and I are available at any time to help support protecting places of worship. And I will turn things back to Director Coleman. Thank you all so much.
Thank you much, Assistant Secretary. And it is now my esteemed honor and privilege to introduce my boss at the White House. Melissa Rogers serves as the Executive Director at the White House Office of Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships and has been a champion for making sure that we can protect places of worship and community spaces. I'll defer to her for her remarks, and then we'll move forward with our presentation. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Marcus. And thank you also to Nicole Wood and to Assistant Secretaries Abdullah and Vinograd for their leadership. We so much appreciate the very hard work that all of the colleagues that you'll hear from today do in this space to keep people safe, and the special emphasis that we're having today on protecting places of worship. We also want to thank all of you for the work that you do, as was mentioned earlier, to care for your communities, and especially when there is a problem that has occurred, and to work to prevent problems in the future. First, I want to join Secretary Abdullah in extending our deepest condolences to the victims and the families of the heinous attack in Jacksonville, Florida this past weekend. As President Biden has said, even as we continue searching for answers, we must say clearly and forcefully that white supremacy has no place in America. We must refuse to live in a country where Black families going to the store or Black students going to school live in fear of being gunned down because of the color of their skin. Hate must have no safe harbor. Silence is complicity, and we must not remain silent. We also want to extend our deepest condolences to everyone who has been victimized by gun violence and hate-fueled attacks. Well, as we've already noted, we're here today to talk with you about protecting places of worship. President Biden has pledged to do everything in his power to ensure that everyone can live without fear, including being able to practice their faith without fear. This is a bedrock principle of our nation's commitment to religious freedom for everyone. The Biden-Harris administration will continue to work shoulder to shoulder with Americans of all faiths and beliefs to safeguard these cherished principles. And to achieve these aims, President Biden has signed and his administration is implementing laws that will make communities safer, including the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, and the Jabara Hire No Hate Act, which I know many of you have worked on these pieces of legislation, and we thank you for it. The administration is also taking executive actions, including ones to reduce gun violence and prioritize efforts to combat hate crimes of all sorts. We are also implementing, as was mentioned earlier by Assistant Secretary Vinograd, the first ever national strategy to counter domestic terrorism and the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. In connection with these efforts, we are continuing the work of a couple of interagency groups that I want to mention in particular. That includes the interagency group dedicated to countering anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and related forms of bias and discrimination, as well as Marcus mentioned earlier, the Protecting Places of Worship Interagency Policy Committee. So we want to thank you for your very important leadership on these issues and the opportunity to work with you to keep everyone safe. As President Biden has said, no one should feel afraid to attend a religious service, school, or community center, or to walk down the street wearing the symbols of their faith. We look forward to the conversation today and to continuing it in the days ahead. Again, thank you for everything you do for your communities and everything you do to make our nation stronger. And with that, I'll hand it back over to my colleague, Marcus, right now. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Melissa, Assistant Secretary Vinograd, Assistant Secretary Abdullah, and Executive Director Rogers. Appreciate you all for your opening remarks. And again, I want to recap what we will be doing today. We're going to hear a threat briefing from DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis. We will go through a federal resource panel. We'll talk about some other ways virtually that you can stay connected with us for protecting places of worship. With that, what we will do now is we will pass it to our colleague, and I just want to set this up before we start the presentation. We recognize across faith traditions, as was noted in the comments, that there are a lot of religious observances that are going to start happening in the next weeks and months. We also recognize that there are community spaces and safe spaces. So what we also know is that protecting places of worship absolutely is important year round. But what we are going to do as part of National Preparedness Month, which is in September, is we're going to have 2 full weeks of action. And so these are 2 weeks that everybody that's listening can begin to connect with their local law enforcement or local first responders on and think about what kind of community events might be best supporting multi-faith and working across faiths to help protect places of worship or different activities to protect community spaces. For our part, virtually, we'll be having a number of engagements across the department and with our federal interagency partners as part of these weeks of action. Stay tuned for more information, but just know that our Protecting Places of Worship Weeks of Action is going to start Sunday, September 17th, and will go all the way until September 30th. And again, we will have virtual sessions. You see some of the links here, and we'll be providing this information to everybody that's registered for the webinar. But we really want to encourage you all to take advantage of National Preparedness Month and some of the information you're going to hear today to plan some community events to help advance protecting places of worship and community spaces. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our next colleagues. You heard Assistant Secretary Samantha Vinograd talk a little bit about the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, and we actually have the director from that office on the line today. So I'm going to have Mr. Braniff come on and provide some additional information and resources for you all to know about and use year-round. With that, I'll pass it over to our colleagues from DHS Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships.
Thank you, sir. And thanks everybody for joining us today. It's just really important for us to have these relationships. My name is William Braniff, and I serve as the director for the department's Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, which focuses primarily on upstream prevention. As our name suggests, we rely on critical partnerships with faith groups like yourselves, with service providers like social service and behavioral health specialists, with state and local governments, with schools, together to collectively create a violence prevention ecosystem that can keep our communities safe. Faith communities like yours are a source of incredible strength. And by building healthy individuals, families, and communities, you are helping to prevent violence every day. And we want to help you build on those strengths, build on those relationships, by helping connect you and all of our partners with resources if you have concerns that someone in your orbit may be gravitating towards violence. So how do we convene our partners so that we can offer educational, technical, and financial support? Slide, please. One way we can do this is through our field staff, which is small but mighty, and covers down on all the FEMA regions and therefore all states and US territories. Now, they may have to travel 1 or 2 states over to come visit with you, but in general, these field staff live in your communities, they share your concerns, and they're there to help you build targeted violence prevention capacity and connect you with others who may help you in that work. So just a quick note, we have coverage in about 15 states currently. We're growing that team, but we do travel a lot and we do come and engage. So please reach out to me if you're interested in building local prevention, upstream prevention capacity. Slide, please. Another way we can support you and your communities is through the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program. At any one time, we're supporting between 70 and 100 community-based organizations, state and local government entities, academic institutions, and nonprofits, all of whom have designed their own programs to help keep their communities safe. We believe passionately that communities know best, and that it's our job to support those community-based efforts, to learn from them, and then to help share best practices with other communities. Each of the last 3 years, we've provided $20 million in grant funding, with this third year, the most recent year, about to be announced. These community-based efforts have done some incredible work to build on those community strengths and crowd out vulnerabilities to violence on the margins. A really important community of interest that we've helped to curate that can provide a lot of reach back resources for you if you are going down the road of creating some of these capacity building programs. We can connect you with other groups that have gone down that road. Slide, please. And another way that we can support you or try to help support you is by maintaining an online resource called the Prevention Resource Finder. In March of 2023, the Department of Homeland Security launched this resource in concert with the White House. It's a comprehensive web repository of federal resources to assist communities in preventing acts of targeted violence and terrorism. So the site serves as a single access point for critical prevention resources and training materials for practitioners and community stakeholders across the country. PreventionResourceFinder.gov, you can see the URL at the top of the slide, builds on the Biden-Harris administration's national strategy for countering domestic terrorism released in June of 2021. With the launch of PreventionResourceFinder.gov, stakeholders and prevention practitioners will no longer have to navigate multiple websites to find critical resources and training materials. We've put them all in one place in an easy to navigate website. This website features resources from 17 different federal partners. And in fact, it's approximately 100 unique resources from these 17 partners. such as tools that communities can use to build local support networks, to identify and then help mitigate against someone gravitating toward violence. So from the homepage, the site is organized into 5 searchable categories: community support resources, evidence-based research, grant funding opportunities, training opportunities, and then information sharing platforms. This is not the only way to get in touch with the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, but it is one way that you can get in touch with us. We monitor that mailbag on this resource consistently. Thank you for what you do every day and for taking the time to be with us today. If the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships or any of the entities that provide resources into the PRF can be of service to you, or if you have recommendations for us on how we can do our work more effectively, please reach out to us at Prevention Resource Finder, one word, Prevention Resource Finder at headquarters, or excuse me, at hq.dhs.gov, and I'll drop that in the chat. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to you, Marcus.
Thank you for that. I'm actually going to go back a slide so people can see. So as mentioned, and it already is placed in the chat already, the link to the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grants Program and the link to the Prevention Resource Finder. And Mr. Braniff just provided the direct email to Prevention Resource Finder at hq.dhs.gov. Those are all resources that are available for you on the prevention front. We're now going to move to our next colleague who's going to talk about some of the resources specifically for facilities and some of the training opportunities and resources that are available for places of worship or community spaces. With that, call up our colleagues from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Good afternoon. Rob Mooney here. I'm the Supervisory Protective Security Advisor out of Region 3. And also serving as the acting branch chief for the active assailant branch in our at headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Today, first of all, I want to thank FEMA, our other federal, state, and local partners for the opportunity to collaborate. But most importantly, thank all of you taking time out of your busy schedules and making security at your house of worship a priority. My goal here today is to highlight some of the available CISA resources that are available to you. If you don't take anything else away that I say this morning, I would strongly encourage you to check out CISA.gov. There are a tremendous amount of resources across the whole suite of things that we do. And very importantly, everything that we do is free and it's voluntary, right? So please check those things out at CISA.gov. Next slide, please. So if I could, I just wanted to point you towards a few of our products that speak specifically to securing houses of worship or protecting houses of worship. The first one I want to talk about briefly is the Houses of Worship Security Guide, Mitigating Attacks on Houses of Worship. It's designed to be a framework so that faith-based organizations of all shapes and sizes can leverage this to start that security planning process, okay? The next one, and I'm going to show you just a snapshot of it here, is a self-assessment tool for houses of worship. There are a number of resources in your community from local law enforcement that can help you with these, state law enforcement, and protective security advisors, which I'll wrap up with at the end. But we also, if you're comfortable in the security space, conducting a self-assessment, we do have an interactive tool that is available to you. Another thing that you have at your disposal on our website is Protecting Houses of Worship video. It's a multi-faith look at options for consideration to mitigate risk to places of worship in similar facilities. And there are a number of other documents and resources available to you. And there's also a QR code here on the screen if you're interested in going directly to those resources. Next slide, please. One of the recent products that we recently produced was the 6 steps to enhancing security against targeted violence. This is a straightforward document that breaks down just a couple of simple steps to start moving the ball for shoring up security at your house of worship. First of all, step 1 is understanding that risk, and it points you to a variety of different resources available through the NTAS bulletins, the DHS fusion centers, which you've heard about, as well as that security self-assessment. Step 2 is understanding your space taking a layered security approach and evaluating the needs of your facility and where your vulnerabilities are at. The next one is develop a practice plan. Create a security and emergency action plan, right? What I also want to note here is it's very important to not only put somebody in charge of developing that plan, but put the plan in writing. And that's step 4. It's training, educating our greeters to make a team approach for securing that house of worship. Step 5, we focus on pursuing grants or other means of obtaining resources for securing the security apparatus needed at your facility. And lastly, know how to report hate crimes or any other incidents at your facility. And also in that, in identifying how to report these things is establish those relationships with local law enforcement and other folks in your community. Next slide, please. Also want to point out here, as I mentioned earlier, the self-assessment tool. If you're comfortable and are well-versed in security, this self-assessment tool is easy to use. It's interactive and security focused, and it allows you to walk through and identify what security measures are in place at your facility, and will help you make some decisions on potential security measures, and it'll also help you review best practices, right, and other available resources. And will also help guide the development of your investment justifications, which can be used in support of the nonprofit security grant. Next slide, please. One thing that I didn't mention it was a document that's going to be coming out in support of the 6 steps to the house of worship. There'll be a companion document, a house of worship placemat that will focus on low cost, no cost solutions for enhancing security. The last thing I want to talk about is our regional staff. Across the country in all 50 states, covering all 50 states and territories, are what we call protective security advisors, such as myself, and cybersecurity advisors. They are the liaisons from CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and they are out there to promote and deliver on all of CISA services. I would encourage you to touch base with them if you do not know your local protective security advisor or cybersecurity advisor. On the next slide, it'll identify central at CISA at CISA.gov. But I would encourage you to get in touch with them. They're there. They have a variety of different resources, from vulnerability assessments of different size and scope. They have some exercises at their disposal. In addition to that, they have training. We often provide active shooter training for local houses of worship and other organizations. And we have a variety of different training course offerings through our Office for Bombing Prevention. So please reach out. If you do not know your local protective security advisor, get to know that individual, and make sure that you're taking advantage of this full suite of CISA resources. Next slide, please. As promised, central at CISA.dhs.gov is the email address. Email them, let them know what state and city that you're located in, and you'd like to get in touch with your local protective security advisor, and they will put you in contact with them. And that's all I have. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much from our colleagues from CISA. And we have actually just launched and opened a poll for everybody to participate in that's interested. There's 4 questions for you to answer for the poll. So we're going to give everybody about a few seconds to provide responses to these poll questions. This helps us do a few things. One, as we're developing some of our continuing resources and materials, that we're keeping the audience that we're seeking to serve in mind. Number 2, as you heard, we have protective security advisors across the country that you can get connected to by emailing central@cisa.dhs.gov. These are great people who are more than happy to make sure that you get connected with local law enforcement. In some instances, they'd be able to work with you and help talk through conducting a security assessment alongside local first responders. I myself was able to spend some time with a protective security advisor in Savannah, Georgia, where we did a facility assessment for one of the local churches, one of the historic churches in Savannah. And so, again, these are people that are part of a broader team. To be clear, the other thing about our CISA contacts is if you do not have direct relationships with state, local, tribal, territorial, or municipal law enforcement, they are very helpful in facilitating those relationships as well. We recognize that security, like all things, start locally. And so we want to make sure that we equip you with those resources. We'll leave the poll open for a few more seconds as I transition to the next slide, where we will hear from our friend Mark Silvera. Mark is probably one of the most famous voices at FEMA on this topic because he is the program manager for one of the most popular programs, the Nonprofit Security Grant. So Mark, I'll leave the poll open for folks as you're providing, I know, this preview information for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you, Marcus. And I'd like to start by just again introducing myself. My name is Mark Silvera. I'm the National Program Manager for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program at DHS FEMA, as well as being a portfolio manager for some of our other Homeland Security Grant programs. So I'd like to start my brief with sharing one example of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program funds in action. As you may recall, not too long ago, there was an incident that took place in Memphis, Tennessee at the Margolin Hebrew Academy when an armed assailant attempted to enter the academy the morning of July 31st, 2023. Due to the Nonprofit Security Grant Program funded safety and security enhancements at the academy, the assailant was unable to gain access to the academy. The grant identified the individual as well as visualized the incoming threat, as well as captured images of the assailant's vehicle. Access control, intrusion barriers, and an emergency lockdown system stopped the assailant's progress into the facility. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program funding was a critical component in preventing a potential mass shooting, ultimately saving lives, and led to the apprehension of the assailant by law enforcement later. Since the inception in 2005, the Nonprofit Security Grant Program has provided over $843 million in federal assistance to 501c3 nonprofits, obtain key resources to support safety and security-related projects and activities, enhance preparedness with a focus on building prevention, protection capabilities against terroristic and other extremist attacks due to that nonprofit's ideology, belief, mission, or purpose, while also striving to strengthen the nonprofit's community-based preparedness and partnerships. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program is a pass-through program. This means for practical purposes, nonprofits apply to a state entity, in this case, the state administrative agency for where the nonprofit resides. And the state in turn submits to FEMA on behalf of the nonprofits. So if a nonprofit is planning to apply for the next offering of the DHS FEMA's Nonprofit Security Grant Program, which will be announced sometime in fiscal year 2024, or just wants to familiarize yourself with the nonprofit's mission, purpose, allowable activities, how to create an application package, and ultimately submit your application, I strongly encourage you to consider starting now. Historically, nonprofits who are proactive are more successful in navigating the end-to-end application creation and submission process. Keeping that in mind, as the program manager, I would like to recommend a starting point for you. So if anyone is interested in the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, I invite you to navigate to the FEMA Preparedness Grants website and bookmark it. Next, familiarize yourself with the site content, including the informational video, tools, and resources to include but not limited to those that are listed on the slide, including the Nonprofit Subrecipient Quick Start Guide, the 4 steps for nonprofits to apply, and probably most important, sign up to the NSGP email listserv at FEMA-NSGP@FEMA.dhs.gov, which is at the bottom of the slide being displayed. FEMA's Grants Program Director and the Nonprofit Security Grant Program team continue to focus on providing quality customer service to all our partners through outreach and engagement, with a concentration on keeping in touch with prior NSGP recipients and reaching out to engage with potential first-time applicants throughout the nonprofit community at large, including those who represent and or support underserved rural communities and vulnerable populations. This is accomplished through year-round live and virtual outreach sessions, webinars, video conferences, technical assistance deliveries. And we focus on the program, tools, resources, lessons learned, all focused on preparing nonprofits to be successful in applying for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. In addition, and as mentioned earlier, most importantly, we try to foster a real-time connection between DHS, FEMA, and the nonprofit community to answer your questions, address concerns, and provide valuable information through the dedicated NSGP email communications conduit, our NSGP listserv. To that end, our next series of NSGP webinars is in the final planning stages. And if you are interested in those offerings or any other aspects of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, the best way to get connected and stay informed is to sign up for the NSGP email listserv at FEMA-NSGP@FEMA.dhs.gov. With that, I turn it back to Mr. Marcus Coleman. Thank you, sir.
Mark, thank you. And again, 3 things that I want to just note where we are in this presentation right now. We've already heard about some prevention resources, including a grant program and people to think about preventing acts of targeted violence. Our colleagues from CISA provided tools that specifically think about how to do a facility assessment, provided information about active shooter trainings, the kind of things that help to make a strong story or narrative or investment justification for a program that I know has a lot of interest. Mark just laid out, there's a lot of resources that are already available. If you are hearing this for the first time, we need you to go to the resources that are being provided by Mark. Look through the information about the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. And as he mentioned, stay connected. He's given you an email. It's very responsive. We, of course, will continue to partner with FEMA as it relates to the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. We want to make sure that folks are equipped. We know we're thinking about religious observances in the fall, but it's really important to make sure that we're thinking about this year round. And so with that, I will end the poll. Thank you for those who were able to participate. And we will share results briefly. So we talked about people who may be intending to develop a safety or security plan over the next few months, recognizing that, right, some people might have already started or may not know where to start. We're hoping we give you some information there. We've talked a little bit about the type of trainings that people might have taken. And so we'll provide information on that. And then again, number 4, what would be most helpful to any organization that's interested in preventing acts of terrorism or other forms of targeted violence. So thank you very much for participating in that poll. This will be very useful for us as we continue to think about the next type of activities that we continue to develop. I want to take you to 2 of our colleagues who do on the ground convenings as well as virtually to talk through some very important issues as it relates to, again, protecting places of worship and some of the things that may come up on the prevention side. We're first going to start with our colleagues at the Department of Justice Community Relations Service with my dear friend, a leader in this space and has been doing a lot of work across faith traditions and across communities across the country. Harpreet, who will talk a little bit about their particular forums that they do to promote education and dialogue on protecting places of worship. Harpreet.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you to DHS Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, DHS and DOJ for coordinating this and inviting the Community Relations Service to be a part of this. As Marcus said, my name is Harpreet Singh Mocha. I serve as the National Program Manager on Muslim, Arab, Sikh, South Asian, and Hindu communities. I work at the Department of Justice Community Relations Service, otherwise known as CRS, which serves as the American peacemakers by facilitating understanding and improving communication in communities facing conflict and developing communities' ability to independently prevent and resolve future conflicts. CRS provides facilitation, mediation, training, consultation services that improve communities' abilities to problem solve and build capacity to prevent and respond to conflict, tension, and hate crimes based on race, color, national origin, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and disability. CRS was established by Title 10 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and expanded by Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009. CRS provides programs designed to strengthen community and law enforcement partnerships, as well as school-based programs that improve problem solving between students. The goals of CRS programs are to help parties in conflict to learn about different perspectives, share information about resources and best practices, and support communities as they identify and implement solutions. One of the programs that I wanted to highlight that is pertinent to our discussion today is the Protecting Places of Worship Forum. This half-day forum provides faith-based leaders and congregations with information about religious hate crimes, local, state, and federal law enforcement threat assessments, and steps to protect places of worship from potential hate crimes and other threats of violence. This program encourages the implementation of security programs, offers best practices for security, fosters networking and community outreach, and provides resources such as examples of security plans and community responses. The program's goals are to, 1, identify best practices for protecting places of worship, 2, improve participants' understanding of local, state, and federal hate crimes laws and ways to report alleged hate crimes, 3, build a faith-based working group tasked with working on safety and security issues, and 4, identify federal, state, and local partners, resources, programs, tools to help secure and protect places of worship. The forum includes the following components. Law enforcement experts provide an overview of federal and state hate crime laws, such as the U.S. Attorney's Office, the local district attorney's office, and the Attorney General's office of the individual state. 2, law enforcement experts provide an overview of hate crime statistics and hate crime symbols. That's done by FBI and local police. 3, law enforcement and security experts provide an overview of strategies to secure places of worship, prepare staff, clergy, congregants on resource tools and programs and active shooter program. And this is where we invite our partners that have spoken above before me, where we invite CISA, we invite CISA to talk about building security teams, their assessment programs, and having a protective security advisor there. We invite FEMA to talk about the nonprofit security grant or the state administration agency that administrates the nonprofit security grant in those states and what have you. And we also incorporate and include faith-based institutions that have worked on this. And we do a forum where we share best practices on what's worked. And what we've seen in our focus groups is that similar situated organizations learn a lot from each other in addition to learning and networking with subject matter experts in the fields that work on these resources, programs, and tools that the government has to offer in helping places of worship secure their institutions. We offer this program throughout the country. We have 14 different offices. If you are interested in this program, which is a one-stop shop where we bring all the resources and speakers to you, and all you do have to attend, it's a great roadmap to start the process in learning and executing on how to secure these your places of worship. Please reach out to me. I'll put my contact in the chat. Also, I wanted to talk to you about, we have 2 upcoming programs, one in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, which will be happening on September 19th, and also the second one in Dallas, Texas, happening on September 30th, 2023. If you need more information or flyers about both of those events or would like to attend, do reach out to me and I can provide that information. As I end, I wanted to let you know I'm going to put some resources in the chat that are very helpful. First, a website on the Community Relations Service that will speak more about our program and the different programs in addition to protecting places of worship. Also, a website that the Department of Justice has made on hate crimes, where you can learn about federal hate crimes and how to report them and other resources and go from there. So with that, I wanted to thank you for your time, your interest in this topic, and I'm going to hand it back to Marcus. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Harpreet. And we will conclude with the presentations with our colleagues from DHS Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. For those that do not know, the Department of Homeland Security has an Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, and they also work year-round across the country, have staff that are on the ground in communities working on a number of issues, which includes some of the discussions and topics related to protecting places of worship. And so it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Renee Dupuy, who will talk a little bit more about civil rights and civil liberties work, how to be in contact with civil rights and civil liberties. A key thing we want to reinforce to everybody is we work across the full federal family to bring these conversations to communities, to neighborhoods. And so with that, Renee, will pass it to you to provide a little bit more context on the work of civil rights and civil liberties and ways that they can engage with your team.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to stand alongside my colleagues from across DHS, the White House, and other federal agencies in support of this important work and essential topic. Again, my name is Renee Dupuy, and I'm the section chief for community engagement in the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And we in CRCL are particularly vested in the ability of persons in the U.S. to safely exercise their civil rights and civil liberties, especially for religious, ethnic, and racial minority and other traditionally marginalized communities. In order to protect civil rights and civil liberties, we must combat domestic terrorism in all forms. CRCL's role is twofold. One, to protect all communities, especially those most impacted, and thereby help the department pivot towards focusing on protecting minority and marginalized communities. And then 2, to ensure that civil rights and civil liberties are not violated in the administration of the department's activities, taking into account that this issue disparately impacts minority communities. So we recognize the many challenges faced by faith-based communities, in particular, as you confront man-made threats and violent acts in our country, and further recognize that after the cameras are turned off and the media attention subsides, these incidents still have long-lasting and far-reaching effects. Through our community engagement work, CRCL works to build trust and establish a routine process for communication and coordination with diverse community and faith leaders and organizations across the country. I won't be the first to have made this comment, but this work is very important to me personally because I am a person who is in community-based organizations that are heavily steeped in faith-based activities. And so for me, this is not just a professional assignment, but it's a personal assignment as well. And so in our community engagement section, we are currently resuming our post-pandemic in-person community outreach and engagement, as well as expanding our reach across the nation. And so what we know is that faith-based organizations need to be on our first line of outreach, because we know specifically that faith leaders are the very activated and very vocal stakeholders within the community, and typically speak for the communities that they serve and the interests that are most important in those communities, and that we're able then to do our best community engagement work when we first engage with those leaders. We too have a small but mighty team of community engagement experts, and they're assigned to specific locations across the nation. I encourage you to reach out to us, and our contact information is listed here, but community engagement at hq.dhs.gov. That'll be one way to understand where your community liaison is. And in our work, we're here to listen and respond to your concerns and questions. We also work with our DHS partners to help ensure that the department is available to assess your needs, build trust, and provide access to our protection resources. So we regularly engage with faith-based communities and have conducted security awareness town halls. We work with our partners that you've heard from today with CISA and FEMA, and also with the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships. And in addition to that, and in addition to the work that we do in our faith-based activities, we also work to address any civil rights and civil liberties concerns that may be had for other impacted communities, including Muslim communities, Jewish communities, Latino communities, Native American and Black communities that may result from civil rights and civil liberties impacts from DHS policies, programs, and initiatives. So again, we have shared some resources here. If you have not yet had a relationship with us in community engagement, we're sharing our contact information and hope that you'll reach out to us. But as we are doing our expansion across the nation, it's very likely that we'll be reaching out to you. I thank you for an opportunity to speak to you. I look forward to you availing yourself of these resources and learning more about the program that we have in CRCL. I would also encourage you to subscribe to our CRCL newsletter so that you're made aware of some of the activities that we're engaged in. Thanks so much, Marcus. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Renee. And as we mentioned, we have been going through questions and answers through the chat, and so appreciate your questions there. As we get to the conclusion of the webinar, I'm actually going to go back to each presenter and ask them for one piece of advice or one upcoming event that maybe you've already shared or that you want to provide to faith leaders for how they can get engaged or stay engaged with your contact with your respective office. And so we'll start with our colleagues at DHS Center for Partnerships and Prevention. William, what is a piece of advice or an upcoming way that faith and community leaders can continue to be engaged with your office?
So a little bit earlier, I added another email address into the chat, which is the email address that you can use to contact our regional prevention coordinators and start a dialogue. The word partnerships is in the name of our program because we know that you can't do this alone. None of us can do this alone. It's about building partnerships that create those relationships, those trust-based relationships, so that if something starts to go south, we have those trust-based relationships and we can intervene right before we have to engage in a criminal justice intervention, right? That early upstream prevention. But that only happens if we form a relationship before the crisis occurs. And so I would really encourage you to reach out to CP3Field at hq.dhs.gov. Again, it's in the chat, and start a relationship with the regional prevention coordinator that services your locality, and then let's go from there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And we will drop that in the chat. Let's go over to Robert at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. A lot of awesome tools. I know that there's a protective security advisor as well. And you are a protective security advisor. I've worked in that role also.
Yes, sir.
What's a piece of advice you have for a faith leader or a community leader that may be contacting their protective security advisor after emailing central@cisa.gov?
Well, thank you for that. And since the relationship piece was taken, which is extremely important, everything starts with relationships. In emergency management, they say the last place that you want to exchange business cards is at the scene of an incident. So following up on that, I would encourage folks to put somebody in charge of security, make it a priority, put that plan on paper, and train their folks to the plan. It's as simple as that in getting things started. And make sure that you're taking full advantage of the resources available to you.
Excellent. And as mentioned, CISA has a lot of great virtual efforts coming up as part of Protecting Places of Worship Weeks of Action, but they're also doing great stuff year-round, virtually and in person as well. Mark Silvera, so I have just a clarifying question for you, sir. The nonprofit security grant, is it just faith institutions who are eligible for that grant, or what other kind of private nonprofits might be eligible for the nonprofit security grant program?
Sure. Thanks, Marcus, for the question. So houses of worship are obviously one type of nonprofit, but to be eligible for the nonprofit security grant program, given its name, an entity must be a 501c3 and tax exempt under Section 501A of the IRS code, which is the traditional nonprofit community. There is 1.5 to 1.8 million such registered entities. So private, nonprofit, and having a threat or risk of terrorist or extremist attack are the three keys to the competitive application process of NSGP. One message, if I could sort of say one or two things about this. Almost all federal grants, including NSGP, has some nuances and can be complicated for folks that are not familiar. So while there is a hiatus right now between the conclusion and award of the fiscal year 23 awards, and before we actually get an appropriation from Congress, including a new NSGP grant, which will take place sometime after 1 October, this is the time to get yourself familiarized with the program, the process, and who the primary point of contact is for you as a nonprofit to navigate this end-to-end process. I'm the end of the process. In between myself and you as a nonprofit is your state administrative agency. There is an office and a point of contact within every 56 states and territories across the United States that you have to have on speed dial, because that's the main point of contact to navigate the internal states process before they submit an application on your behalf to me at the federal level. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that. Harpreet, so the Community Relations Service, I know that there's a form, but you actually have regional counterparts as well, and some counterparts that are in different jurisdictions. Harpreet, can you provide a little bit of context on what your colleagues that are in communities do day to day, and how they may be able to be helpful to faith-based and community groups or people that are representing communities that might otherwise experience hate crimes, such as the LGBTQ plus community? And just what are some ways that we can stay connected with some of your colleagues that are on the ground across the country?
Yes, thank you, Marcus. That's a great question. We have 14 different offices with conciliators in all of those offices working with different communities, including faith-based communities and LGBT communities. And they are approachable, and they have a wealth of resources. They have networks that are already established with these resources and programs and tools that are out there, and can help you, even connect you to them if you're having difficulty navigating a website or navigating a resource, or if you don't want the complete program and going from there. So definitely they not only work on the Protecting Please Worship program, but they have networks with other communities and what have you to create networks that will help provide resources and connect people who are in need of resources or in need of assistance, and go from there. So we try to not only, like I said, we don't only do the trainings, but we facilitate dialogues between law enforcement and communities, between communities. Additional to that, we do trainings, we do mediations, and we share best practices. Where what we've learned throughout the nation is we share those best practices with communities so they don't reinvent the wheel. So I hope I answered your question, but we have those resources out there. You can contact me, you can visit our website. We have people in the 14 different offices nationwide that are here to assist and ready to help.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Harpreet. And Renee with the DHS Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. So I know that you have the community engagement section, and I know that you have stellar team members who also do work year round. I appreciate you for providing kind of a broad context of the portfolio and work across CRCL. If somebody wants to work with CRCL to do a local community engagement, what steps would they take, and what are some of the topics that can be discussed during those roundtables with civil rights and civil liberties?
We have a wealth of different topics that we discuss with our stakeholders. We are doing some great work right now around Indigenous community language access, but we also have done some really strong engagement around the handling of religious materials, and doing so in collaboration with our other federal partners. I cannot stress enough how important the partnership is between us and DHS, and even extending beyond that so that we can successfully serve communities together. So I think that partnership of us together, and all of us that are on this line today have worked together collectively to serve communities. And we want our community stakeholders to be able to avail themselves of those activities. So one thing that I would encourage is that when community stakeholders are designing events or putting events together, reach out to us, but recognize that we can collaborate internally to provide you with a full body of resources from the department as a whole. So I think it's really important to be able to do that. But at any time, please reach out to community engagement at hq.dhs.gov. When you're planning your upcoming events, contact us. We want to be a part of it. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will leave the Q&A pod open for additional questions, and we'll address those in the Q&A pod and in the chat. The chat feature has a lot of the links and contact information that was provided to you all through the presenters, so please save that as well. What we will be doing from here is three things. One, we'll be providing a follow-up email, just providing some of the key contacts that were provided today. Two, for folks that have registered, once we clean up the recording and the transcripts, we will repost it for those that were not able to join. I will note that portions of the presentation will not be shared publicly, as the information quickly changes, and we don't want to be sharing old information. But the third thing is you'll all have the opportunity again to join us again as part of National Preparedness Month, which starts this Friday. September 1st, and it will be going until September 30th. Those last 2 weeks, we are looking to see and identify different faith-based and community-based organizations who are interested in helping to elevate preparedness, safety, and security actions for places of worship and community spaces. So stay tuned for more information. Thank you all very much for joining. Again, I'm going to leave the room open for a few minutes for our team to gather all the necessary and appropriate information for us to follow up, and then also to help address and close as many questions as we can that are still in the Q&A pod. If we do not address questions here, we will provide those questions to the appropriate presenters in offices so they can respond moving forward. With that, thank you all very much for joining the webinar. Appreciate it.